Good morning. Thank you, Mark, for the kind introduction, and I'm just overwhelmed to see so many of you here today for our incubator meeting. This is a fantastic turnout. I'm happy for you, Mark, to be Jerry Springer, as long as I don't have anything thrown at me, or as long as I don't get hit. I want to begin. I'm just here to say a couple words of welcome, really. Before turning it over to the real meat of the program. You have before you on the program many quite qualified experts who can help guide our discussion and enlist your participation, which is really what we're here to do in the thinking and design and collaboration around these initiatives. I just wanted to offer a couple words of framing, and I'll begin with a little anecdote. As Judge Uhas mentioned, I had the great honor of clerking at the U.S. Supreme Court one year. And the law clerks have a little tradition of, in addition to getting to know the justice for whom they're clerking, they have the opportunity to have a little tea or coffee or a lunch with other justices around the building, just to have a chance to meet them and whatnot. And I remember we had this opportunity with Justice David Souter, who probably goes down in the books as one of the shyest justices ever to sit on the Supreme Court, and one of the most habitual, at least in terms of his what he ate for lunch. Always an apple and a cup of yogurt. And when we had lunch with him, it was no different. There he was, munching his apple and eating his yogurt. And he was talking to us about law practice. And I'll never forget what he said. He was recounting his experience as a young attorney growing up in New Hampshire. And his reflections on that were that the line between what we today regard as private law practice and public interest work was just not a very a strict dividing line. There was no strict dividing line between those two things. He basically said that in his community, it was unheard of, to him at least, that anybody who needed a lawyer should not be able to obtain a lawyer. In his community, whoever needed a lawyer, whether for a probate matter, a divorce, a land transaction, small business, whatever, whoever needed a lawyer could get a lawyer, because it was just understood that in that community, that's what lawyers did. They made themselves available to the community in whatever fashion and way made most practical sense. But just as no one would ever go without a doctor in such a community, no one would go without a lawyer. Okay, well, Justice Souter grew up in Ware, New Hampshire, a town of like 20 people. So this is harder to extrapolate, of course, to the big metropolises and the big regions that you all come from. So one of the challenges we have is how to take the core idea of what Justice Souter is talking about what our profession is supposed to be about, and make it real with the scale and the sustainability that we're all looking for. Part of what Justice Souter is talking about is actually captured in the Business and Professions Code of California. And I'll just read you one piece of that, which I always find extremely instructive. So section 6068H of the Business and Professions Code, this is actually a statute. It says, "It shall be the duty of an attorney never to reject for any consideration personal to himself or herself the cause of the defenseless or the oppressed." I'll say that again. It shall be the duty of an attorney never to reject for any consideration personal to himself or herself the cause of the defenseless or the oppressed. Now, that is, if you stop and think about it, that is, I think, in large part, perhaps why you and your students, or the students who you know, decided to go to law school. And that motivation, that aspiration, should guide us today. Let me say a couple words about the challenge that we face. So we're familiar with legal aid, and we're familiar with some of the statistics around poverty. California has one of the higher poverty rates among states in the nation, above average, roughly around 17%. One interesting graphic, just to put a picture on it, that I gleaned from the Hastings public interest website is that in California we have less than one legal aid lawyer for every 8,000 indigent people. Okay? That means that if you were to fill AT&T Park, just down the way here, if you were to fill that park with indigent people who qualify for legal aid, there would be just 5 people in that ballpark who are legal aid lawyers to serve the entire ballpark. Okay? That is the challenge with respect to legal aid. Now, we're not talking about, in this gathering today, just about indigent people, according to some poverty guideline. The title is Moderate Means. So if you look at the numbers of people who are living at, let's just say, twice the poverty line, above poverty, at or above poverty, but up to twice poverty, that's an additional 27% of Californians. An additional 27% on top of the 17% who are legally poor. That's about 10 million people, right? So we have a very, very even for people at the median income, most average people can't afford a lawyer for the ordinary transactions that they and challenges that they face. So we're talking about a very significant space here where people need lawyers for various things, highly consequential things that come up in ordinary life, whether it be child support, custody, parental rights, foreclosure, loan modification, access to benefits, education, immigration matters, what have you, the whole gamut. Okay? This project, the reason you're all here, originated from some conversations, really, from a small working group of the California Access to Justice Commission, led by Judge Ron Roby, who's here today. And the small working group, consisting of me, Judge Uhas, Jack London, who I see who's here, originally Mary Flynn, who's now retired but not really retired, Kelly Evans, Lori Zelon, a number of others, got around to thinking about 2 kinds of problems that should be complementary in a certain way. One is the one I've mentioned, which is the tremendous unmet legal needs of people who aren't even poor, who are living, your average person, basically. And then on the other hand, the tremendous numbers that we've seen in recent years of unemployed or underemployed law graduates. Shouldn't there be some supply and demand that meets between these 2 things, the tremendous unmet legal needs and the record rates of under and unemployment among our recent law graduates? So how do we make it possible to marry these 2 trend lines? Okay, so that's part of the big picture challenge. And we've been lucky to garner the interest of the Ford Foundation and the Public Welfare Foundation, as well as our good friends here at the State Bar, to devoting some resources to help tackle precisely this set of problems. Okay, so what we have envisioned is essentially a 2-component project. One part of what we're trying to do is to stimulate, to seed, to develop more and more models of how what we've loosely called incubators might grow and develop. These are, loosely speaking, and others will be more articulate about than I will, initiatives that are designed to get recent law graduates into practice where they are serving the very clientele that we're talking about in a sustainable, professional, expert way. This will require, I think, a number of changes in how we ordinarily think about the ambitions of our law graduates. First of all, I'll just confess to you, and others can speak to this, no one is going to get rich doing this kind of work. But the trend line, I think, is very clear that the days of the big law firms hiring and overhiring young associates from even the top law schools and billing essentially the training costs of those young associates to their large clients, that is quickly fading away. And so there needs to be, I think, a recalibration of what it is we expect our law graduates to do with their law degrees, as well as what they can expect to do as for their personal fortunes as well as their professional lives throughout their careers. And I would say, to return many of the young graduates who we see to the original reasons and motivations as to why they came to the practice of law. Secondly, I think, so that's one of the things we're trying to do, is trying to develop more models of how we can do this. And as you will quickly learn this morning, there is no algorithmic approach. There are a variety of different models, and we're looking to develop them through this initiative. The second thing is hopefully to develop some capacity, either here at the State Bar or through some other higher level entity, to help provide technical assistance and infrastructure and research and evaluation for these emerging initiatives. So like most initiatives in a startup phase, people are trying to get things off the ground, and we don't know what the results are going to be. And we don't know yet what are the best practices. But it would be nice to have, among this community of people here, some kind of infrastructure whereby you can share your ideas, share with each other what's working and what's not, and build in some evaluation and research and monitoring into what you're doing so that we can improve our practice and focus on the things that are working, get rid of the things that are not. Okay, so that infrastructure development is also a crucial piece of what we aim to do. What we're asking you to do here today is both extremely important and also difficult. The first thing is that we're asking for collaboration. There's no way to solve these problems through a single law school initiative or a single lawyer referral service. It's going to require some kind of teamwork between the law schools, between the public interest law organizations, between lawyer referral services, the self-help centers in the courts, private law firms who are interested in developing young attorneys in this way. So we're interested in collaborative efforts that are going to cut across these various institutional and organizational lines that really build a lasting, sustainable initiative. Okay, that's the first thing. The second thing, I think, is we're looking for some scale. We're looking for initiatives that are really going to penetrate these problems in more than a kind of small one-off way. Now this is hard, because it's uncertain. Obviously, you've got to start small, start with things that are manageable. But how can we develop things in a way that involves some serious scalability into the future? Okay. And then lastly, I would say that there is obviously the question of support and funding. Part of what we're going to eventually do, you'll hear more about it later, perhaps later this year. We're offering, through the good auspices of our foundation support, some small mini grants to help initiatives get off the ground. But the crucial point, I think, is to figure out how in the development of these various incubator models we're going to get the requisite contributions from either the law school side, the private firms, or other kinds of community or foundation support. It's going to be some kind of three-legged or even four-legged stool in the end, I suspect, that will provide these young law graduates with the support that they need and the infrastructure they need to get their careers off the ground in a direction that helps to meet these tremendous unmet needs. Okay? So we have these big challenges, and I'm just so excited to see such a large number of people turn out for what is really just our inaugural effort at all of this. And as Kelly and others will perhaps discuss, we're going to take this very meeting. We may have to clone all of you. And we're going to do this meeting again in Southern California, and one more, is it in the Central Valley? Okay, in the Central Valley. So this is statewide, and we will be compiling the results of these meetings, and hopefully through what you will be discussing with each other this afternoon, there will be some actionable ideas that actually emerge from it. I'm just extremely excited by the possibilities, and I look forward to hearing about all of your efforts. Thank you very much.